focused on recording in progress. Great. My classes mainly are focused on high school equivalency. So students either trying to get their GED or their high set. But a couple years ago, I got to do a class that was kind of a special class that was just focused on writing. And the cool thing about that for me was that, in the GED classes, it's a very kind of specific. For one thing, we have a lot of different stuff to cover, so there's only a certain amount of time you have to work on writing, and it's a very specific type of essay writing that they do on the GED. So we're really focused on that. So what I liked about getting to teach this class that focused totally on writing was that I got to try a lot of different little things that I'd either wanted to try or come up with new ideas and kind of experiment. So this presentation is mainly sort of me passing along things I did or things I tried in that class that I thought worked. And also I tried to focus on things that are repeatable, right? And sort of like easily adapted into various versions, right? Because sometimes there'll be a lesson that's good, but it's kind of a very specific thing and it's sort of a one-off thing. So what I tried to do here was really share ideas that are, you can hopefully use many times and adapt them, if you find them useful, which hopefully you will. So first thing I want to say is thank you all for everything you do for students, and I really appreciate it. And for being here, obviously you have, the dedication to try to come here and learn new things. So hopefully you'll find some stuff here that'll be useful to you. That's my goal. Okay, so I usually find in classes that I like to get away from me talking and get to the students doing things as quickly as possible. So you're going to hear a lot of me talking. I'm not going to, pretend otherwise, but I'm going to start off with, after that sort of intro, we're going to do an activity and this one is like very repeatable. I like it because it doesn't take any materials and you can do it, anytime you want to. So this is, it was based off of, it's called the 5-Minute Diary. And this was, it was created by Linda Berry, who is an artist and a writer and a teacher. Her idea was that, she thought that sort of like keeping a diary is like really useful for a writer, but people feel like they don't have enough time. So that her idea was that you could do it, but you could do it in 5 minutes. And so the first thing we're going to do is kind of show you what her thing is. And then I sort of took that. I mean, it's a good exercise in itself, but then I sort of took that and would turn it into, use it in other ways with my students, like take what they came up with and turn it into a bigger lesson. So hopefully you have something to write with and a piece of paper. So we're going to try this again. It's going to take 5 minutes approximately. So the first thing I want you to do is take your paper and just draw a line down the center, a vertical line, cutting your paper in half down the center. And then once you have that, there's going to be a horizontal line that's like about 3/4 of the way down the page. So it should look something like this. So you have 4 spaces and the 2 on the top are bigger. Okay, it doesn't have to be exact, but you should have something that looks like that. Okay, hopefully that makes sense so far. And then in the first one, so on the upper left, I want you to write what happened. Okay, just at the very top, what happened. That's the first box. The second box on the top is you could write what I saw. Okay, so these are things that you saw. And the one on the left on the bottom, you could write like quotes, just the word quotes. Okay, so those are kind of the labels in each box. The last one I'm just going to leave blank for now. We're gonna get to that. That one's going to be a surprise. We're gonna get to the last one. Okay, so this is gonna be timed. Like I said, it's very quick. So we're gonna thinking about yesterday. Okay, so as you're doing this is going to be sort of your 5-minute diary about your day yesterday. So think about what was that, Friday? Okay, so put yourself in the Friday mindset. So the first thing, you're going to have 90 seconds. Okay, the first box is what happened. Okay, and don't worry about like writing complete sentences or grammar or spelling or anything. This is just listing ideas, right? Listing whatever happened. Okay, so you're gonna have 90 seconds to just write down everything you can think of. It doesn't have to be in any particular order, just anything you can think of that happened yesterday. Okay, so does anybody have any questions before we start? Okay, so I'm gonna give you 90 seconds, go. So just write everything you can think of that happened yesterday. Okay, we have about 30 more seconds, keep going. Okay, starting to wrap up. Okay, and just complete if you're in the middle of a sentence or a phrase, whatever, just complete that. Okay, so that was the first one. Now we're gonna go into the second box, right, which is the second one on top. So this one is things that you saw. So again, we're thinking about yesterday. So try to think about visual images, things that you saw yesterday, and just list as many. Again, you're gonna have 90 seconds, list as many things as you saw, things you can remember seeing yesterday. Go. Okay, 30 more seconds. Okay, starting to wrap up. All right, just complete if you're in the middle of a phrase, wrap that up. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to the one on the left on the bottom. This one is just gonna be, it's a little shorter, it's just gonna be 1 minute. So you have 60 seconds. And this time, see if you can think of at least one, but it could be more than one. And as much as possible, something that like is as much as you can remember, like an exact quote. Can you remember like things that people said as much as possible? Like obviously it's not possible all the time to get the exact words, but you got a minute. Think about things that you heard people say again yesterday. Okay, so starting now, a minute. Okay, starting to wrap up. If you're in the middle of a sentence, try to finish that. Okay. Okay, so we just have one more box at the bottom, and this one you're also just gonna have a minute for. And this is my favorite one, but when I first was doing it, I was kind of worried. I was like, I don't know if my students are going to go for this. I might get some pushback, but they always seem to. I mean, they kind of laugh, but they always seem to go for it. And it usually is a fun one in class. So in the last box, you're going to have a minute, and I want you to draw a picture of something that you saw yesterday. Okay, so think about something you saw yesterday. You got a minute, and as best you can, even if you're not an artist, just draw a picture. All right, 1 minute. Okay, about 10 more seconds. All right, putting the final brush strokes on your masterpiece. And okay, so that's the 5-minute diary. That's like the whole thing that Linda Berry does. And it's cool if you I have a link to one of them, but if you Google, there's actually a bunch of different versions of her doing it. And she's kind of tweaked it over the years. Like she has one that's like a 4-minute diary, one that's 6 minutes. So this was just the way I learned it. But you know, if you could also tweak it or use a different version if you feel like your students might need a little extra time or whatever. So usually the first thing when I do this, I usually ask the students like, what was your experience like doing that? Does anybody want to share what that was like for you, just doing that exercise?
This is Rachel.
Hello.
I, before I started this, I thought, well, yesterday was just mundane. I just did a bunch of errands and there was not much to write about. But then when I got into it, I remembered moments in the day that were not mundane. So it was useful.
Nice. That's great to hear. Yeah, I think one of the cool things I like about this is that for most students, they don't have trouble coming up with material for it, right? And I think especially for some students who like sort of lower level students or students who are not confident with, you know, writing an essay or something like that, this can be a nice way to kind of ease them into writing because they're writing about their life. It doesn't seem like it's like a very, it's not so like academic or anything. I did have one student once who was just like really determined to say, he was just like, I didn't do anything yesterday. I don't have anything to write about. I didn't do anything. And I was like, you were alive. Something, you had to be doing something. And finally he told me, he was like, well, all I did was like eat and watch TV. And I was like, well, you can write about that. What did you watch? But usually it is like, even the students usually once they get into it, they take to it pretty well. And the picture is always my favorite, seeing what they share with that. Does anybody want to show us what you drew? You don't have to, but if anybody is an artist and wants to show us, or not an artist and wants to show that's even better when somebody is like really not an artist and shows us, but maybe later we can share this. And then what I usually do in class, like I said, I think that the diary by itself is like kind of a cool exercise, but I usually use it as a jumping off point for them to write something longer. A lot of times, it might be a little bit different if you're one-on-one, but in a class setting, I would usually kind of pair them up with a couple students and have them discuss what they'd written. And then, which you could just do, if you're one-on-one with your student. And then a lot of times I would have the other students, or you could do this yourself, just ask about like, okay, this thing seems most interesting to me. And then write about that thing. right? So then I would have them like expand on, they would say like, oh, I went to a concert or whatever. And then, okay, let's write, a page about going to the concert. And then we can kind of use that as our writing material for the day, and talk about what they wrote there. Or sometimes we would say just like, okay, let's write, some students might want to like just write about the whole day, and you can kind of use your notes and your 5-minute diary as sort of like an outline to just write, like a page about your day, and then we can kind of talk about how to structure that and get into other things. But that's kind of the way I use that, and that's always a fun one. Again, I like it because it's like you can kind of, no materials necessary, and you can use that like anytime you want to, basically. All right, does anybody have any questions about that one before we move on? Oh, and actually, yeah, and this is kind of the breakdown of it. I'm not going to play it now, but I have a go ahead.
Luke, we have a question in here about meeting remotely, especially the picture section.
Yeah.
Do you want to address that later, or go ahead?
Yeah, that's a good question. The times when I was doing this the most, like when I was doing that writing class, it was before the remote thing, so it definitely it could be a little bit different. But I think that, I mean, I think you can still, they can show you, and it's also as much for them. So it's not like, it's not like it's like you're critiquing the picture, right? So it's as much for them to sort of like, visualize something. And yeah, I don't know. If you show it, if you hold it up, can I see it? I'm not sure if that would work or not. Oh, there it is. Yeah, I can kind of see it. Yeah. All right. I saw a tree.
What it is. Yeah.
I saw a tree and a person. I saw a tree and a person. That's what I saw. Yeah. So yeah, I think you could probably try to share the picture, but if you can't see it, it's not like that's a huge deal. I mean, you could still use like the other stuff to kind of, to turn it into a writing project anyway. So, like I would, if you could do it, Roberta just didn't have them try to show it, that would be good. But if you can't see it, I think it'll still be fine. You can still use it. Good question though. I included here a link to one of her videos. I think this was a 6-minute version, but I'm not going to play it now, but we could just include that there in case anybody wants to see it. We could probably share that. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next part here. Okay, so after doing the kind of fun activity, a little just sort of overall about different types of writing to use in the classroom. And I thought that this framework of thinking about like different types of writing was useful to me, because I think in my typical classes, I did a lot of the middle one here, readable, which would be like, if I give them an assignment to like write an essay in class, and it's basically a first draft, but they're writing it. So, and there might be some errors or whatever, but they're writing it to like show me in basically a first draft form, but to try to present it to me. And what I thought was really cool was in this sort of framework of having different types of classroom writing. So provisional writing is more like just writing that they do for themselves. So it could be like, this would be like a journal thing, or like just sort of brainstorming writing. The way that I use this most frequently is like, let's say I want to do like a discussion about like I was doing one recently that was about the invention of the telephone and the effects that a reading about the effects that the telephone had on society. And I started off by saying, okay, I just want you to just spend a few minutes just writing your thoughts on how do you think society would be different if there were no telephones, something like that. And so I just gave a few minutes to kind of just write their ideas down. And then we shared those in a discussion, but it wasn't like, they weren't like sending me the writing. I wasn't critiquing it in terms of like grammar and that kind of stuff. So it's more just about, helping them sort of get their ideas out, organize their ideas on paper, and also kind of showing them that, writing, it isn't always about like, getting a critique and getting feedback, right? There are different types of writing. This kind is just like, for yourself and getting your ideas out. So that's provisional. And that's the way I usually use it, just to kind of get their thoughts going or kind of reacting to something before, discussing something or reading something. And then so readable is like what I said about just like kind of the typical classroom writing. They write a sort of a first draft of an essay, hand that in, I check it out, maybe give them feedback. And then so polished is on the other end of the spectrum, where we're taking something and then, they're taking my feedback, they're writing another draft of it, and they're getting into the process of revision, which a lot of times we don't necessarily do in GED classes because we don't necessarily have time for it. But I think like having this framework and thinking about the different types of writing, to me, it's very helpful because these are all really important types of writing, right? And if they're going to college or different types of careers, you have to do a lot of different writing, right? Some of them are more just provisional. Some of them you have to, take a lot of steps, revise, think about it, take feedback. So I like this framework for that reason, because it helps me to sort of broaden my thinking. Because again, my sort of instinct is just to go to the readable, sort of the middle one. But this helps me to kind of like think about other types of writing. All right, any questions about this one?
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I have two students who are intermediate, maybe high intermediate. And when they submit writing to me, I mostly focus on the grammatical errors. I'm just wondering if there are better ways to give them feedback. I usually just tell them how to say it correctly, but are there better ways to give them feedback?
Yeah, and I think that's a really good question. I don't think there's like one answer to that. That's something that it's like a constant process of thinking about it. And it's even, I think, different for different students. Like as I get to know certain students, I think like even the amount of like, it also kind of depend on the assignment. Like there's certain assignments where I'm more concerned about the overall organization of like making sure they understand the idea of like paragraphs. So I might think about like, what is the, like, what's my goal with the writing assignment? And if it's something other than like just sort of grammar, I might not focus on that as much. Like I might, if I want them to just get the idea of, okay, introductory paragraph, body paragraph, conclusion, I might not focus as much depending on the student. Like some students are just like, they love the feedback and they'll take as much as possible and do good with it. But other ones, I think, as you get to know them, they could, it could be a little overwhelming if, every sentence has a correction when you're trying to teach them something else, like another aspect of writing. So it is, I don't have like one answer for that because I think it depends somewhat on the student. But it's a really good question. And I would say like, think about like, what is what's your purpose in, the particular assignment you gave them. So like, maybe if you have something else you're focusing on, you don't have to like give them the heavy, like grammatical feedback. I actually do have something, some things that I'm going to talk about in a little bit that might also touch on that. So maybe we'll come back to that question as we go, but thank you. That's it. It's a great question. Okay, next one. This is another sort of framework that helps me because it just helps me like think about different types of writing to give students. So this is 3 text types. The first one, argument, is kind of the one that we do most often in GED classes, right? Like the persuasive essay, that kind of stuff. So that one comes fairly naturally. Informative or explanatory. I like this one because like once I did an assignment with students where I asked them to think about something that they're kind of an expert on, right? Something they're good at, they know how to do, and just write a paragraph where they explain how to do that thing, right? And it's not so much about, they don't have to do like a whole argument about something. They're just, kind of simply, it's kind of something they're on their home turf because they know how to do it. and they're the expert, which I think is cool. And I remember doing it one time, and I had them like swap papers with another student, and then see if the student could actually like kind of understand how to do the thing. And I remember one of my favorite memories of that was one student had written something about like, he just described how to make his favorite, pasta dish or something. And the student who read his thing, was at the end, she was like, oh, can I keep this? I want to like try this. I want to try to make this. And I thought that was so cool, because it was like, that's the point of writing, right? That somebody is going to sort of find your words useful. And like, he had written something that was like interesting and useful enough to her that she was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take this and try to make this recipe. So that's another like type of writing. And then narrative, which we don't do a lot of in like GED classes, again, because that's focused on a specific kind of essay, but it's actually really a good thing for students, because they're sort of flexing different writing muscles. So those are just, again, 3 different types of text, and it helps me to keep that in mind to kind of vary the assignments that I'm giving. Okay, I'm gonna keep going here. Okay, so this one, this was something that had really, go ahead.
Excuse me, this is Rachel. What is narrative writing?
Just like stories. Good question. Yeah, so
like fiction?
Yeah, well, it could be fiction, or it could be nonfiction, but just like, so a lot of times in class, it might be students like telling stories about their own life, or, it could be telling a story about something they saw or something like that. But sorry, narrative would be just more of like a story of something that happened, rather than, a persuasive essay or something like that. But I'm actually going to get later to a specific prompt I used for narrative writing. So I'll get to that exercise later. Yeah, good question. Okay, so this one was something I had thought about for a long time before I did this class, which is, I think relates to a question we had earlier. Like, how can I help my students just write better on the sentence level, right? Both in terms of, grammar, but also like the structure of sentences. A lot of times, for newer writers, you see a lot of like it's either very short sentences or just run-on sentences that don't, they don't really have any structure to them. And this was something I thought about. Like, I think, teaching about like how to break an essay into paragraphs, like that's fairly easy, right? Students can kind of get their hands around that. But like, helping them write better on the sentence level is a trickier thing, right? Because I think most of us, the way we sort of learn how to write is, you read books, a lot of books, and you like see good models, and you kind of like internalize it. And if students haven't, we read stuff in class, but it's hard to like get the amount of reading necessary to really get there. So I was trying to this is something I thought about a lot. It's like, how can I really, on the sentence level, improve students' writing? And there was a book I read that was called How to Write a Sentence and How to Read One by Stanley Fish, who, it's a really cool book. It's very short, but if you like, literature and that kind of stuff, it's really fun, because he really gets into, stuff on the sentence level of like his favorite sentences and stuff. It's a fun book if you like that kind of stuff. It was fun for me. So his idea is that in general, we teach writing sort of backward, right? we start with, okay, having a student write an opinion, right? We're like, okay, what's your opinion on this subject? They write their opinion, and then the student, then the teacher gives them feedback, right? And this kind of relates to what we were maybe talking about earlier. And so he thinks that Stanley Fish's idea was that you should swap it around and really teach students the structure of sentences, and different types of structures and how those are useful and what they can do for you. And then once they have those structures and they learn those, they can take those and write their opinions, or they can write anything, and they have that. And that's kind of his idea about the way that, the correct way to teach writing. And I really like this book, but when I first read it, the examples he gives in the book are very like, he's talking to a college class, and he's giving these examples of like, it's this sort of like him using the Socratic method to break down a sentence. And I was like, I don't know if I have confidence in either myself as a teacher, or like that it's going to work in this kind of classroom. And I was like, I liked his idea, but I never I wasn't really sure how to translate it into an adult education class. And then when I was teaching this writing class, I was like, I got to try something. I got to see if I can figure out how to do this. And I came up with an idea, which I was very happy with the way it worked in class. So I started off with just a very simple sentence, right? Like something like Tom drank coffee. And the first thing I would do is just, put this on the board, share this with the students. And I would ask them, like, what is the structure of this sentence? And we would try to figure out the structure. In this case, basically it's like, someone did something to something else, right? And then I would have them as a class kind of try to generate examples of sentences with similar structures. And what's interesting is that some students find it very simple, and they're just like, Sarah ate fruit, whatever, they can come up with a bunch of them. But then we'll also get versions where it's like, Steve ran away. And then it's interesting to like talk about, okay, that's 3 words, and you have a person doing an action, but is it the same structure to say Tom drank coffee and Steve ran away? And then I thought it was a very useful way to like get into the structure of just a simple sentence, right? Because students start seeing it. Okay, that is different. And then you're not talking about like doing an action to a thing. You're talking about like how they're doing the action. So for some students, like just this level of just kind of like talking about it and just figuring out the structure of the simple sentence, like that could be a challenge, but also useful, because by the end of the class, they would get it. Then what I did, I'll share another thing here. So I came up with this, I would just come up with these documents where I would have, we would take the sentence after we had kind of discussed the structure and we had it figured out. And then I would have them write their own versions, 3 sentences that have that same structure. And again, some students would find that really a challenge. For some it was easy, right? They got it, they knew the structure, and they would do it. For some of them, it would take them like kind of a while to figure out what the 3 sentences are. But the nice thing was I had sort of, since they all had their own document, they could kind of go at their own pace. That might not obviously, if you're working one-on-one, it won't come up, but it kind of works. The nice thing about it is it works for different levels, right? Because even if your student is sort of, low intermediate, this might be the level that works for them, right? They're getting just this structure, this sentence versus a different one. But then what I did was I just expanded on the sentence. So I said, okay, when Tom drank coffee, he burned his tongue. And then I had them expand their own 3 sentences using that same structure. So, when Sarah ate fruit, she blah, 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 blah. And again, like some students, you're kind of seeing them, okay, this is where they're, this is the place where they're kind of stretching. And it's a fun one to do in class, because you see, once they sort of have the structure, they sort of fill it in very creative ways. So it was always a kind of an entertaining lesson for me as a teacher also. Not that that's the most important thing, but it should be said, it was enjoyable. And then I just, you can take this as far as you want to. So, when Tom drank coffee, he burned his tongue and wanted to spit out the coffee. So, and wanted to spit out the coffee, but he didn't want to make a mess. So I just kept having them expand, giving them these additional structures and having them expand it. So you can kind of see there. And then I did some other things down here where I sort of gave them I put in like too many details, and I asked them about like editing it down and stuff like that. But that was kind of the overall idea, was just starting from a very small core sentence and then giving them models of like how to build it out into, because that's a lot of what good writing is, right? You got to know how to use, your conjunctions and how to put things into, the difference between a sentence that starts like, with, though Tom drank coffee versus like Tom drank coffee and, right? So I really liked it, and I had really good responses to this in class. All right, so that was that one. I'm gonna keep going here because I feel like I'm gonna run out of time at the end. That's how we always go. At the beginning, you're like, do I have enough material? Then it's like, oh no, do I have enough time? Okay, so this was another one. Another important skill is summarizing. and some different resources here. This first one is the Purdue online writing lab, which in general just has a lot of nice, let's see if this works. No, maybe not. It just has a lot of, nice material to kind of give you the basics of if you want to teach summarizing. So they have a lot of different exercises and resources for that, quotations, paraphrases, all that kind of stuff versus summarizing. So I put that in there just because that's kind of a useful one in general. And then I did, let's see, I have this one open here. Second. One that I did that I thought was a really fun way to do summarizing was I found this website on Britannica.com that they call Demystified. And hopefully are you guys seeing that on screen right now? The Demystified, yeah. Okay. So the cool thing is they have these articles are all pretty nice length. It's kind of write summaries of. So what I would do in class is I would have them kind of look at these, they're kind of interesting questions. Is body language universal? What happened to the dinosaurs? Why do cicadas appear every 17 years? And then sometimes they're nice and topical. Why do we eat turkey on Thanksgiving? How did the tradition of Christmas trees start? So the thing I like about this is that the questions tend to have a good hook to them. So students get kind of interested of, why do we eat turkey, right? I'm kind of interested in myself. Like, why is that? I don't know. And then what I would have them just, read the article. This would be kind of after we had sort of talked about summarizing, but this was a nice way for them to practice that skill. And I would have them read through it and then come back and, present to the class, or if you're working one-on-one, they could just present it to you. But it's another nice thing where it's like the student kind of becomes the expert, right? They read through it, they learn something, and then they write a summary, and then they also kind of, they could share it verbally, so it's kind of like getting a lot of different skills there. So that was another nice way to do summarizing. I also have a type of lesson that involves summarizing. This one is as much like reading as writing, but I've had a lot of good luck with this one, this type of lesson. So this one was inspired by something I had read that talked about the most important skills that, in studies they found that like really good readers do naturally, or they've learned to do. And so I based a lesson around, you can use kind of like one or two of them or all of them, but so asking questions, making predictions, and then writing summaries. And the way I usually do it is I'll, this one's about the trolley problem, which is kind of a fun thing for students to learn about and discuss. So I'll have them, like, first I'll just show them the title and ask them to like come up with a question based on the title and make a prediction about what they're going to read based on the title. And then I kind of just break things up into paragraphs, and like for each paragraph I'll ask them, okay, what, write down at least one question, or what questions do you have? And then I'll ask them to make a prediction, that kind of thing. So that's kind of just the reading aspect of it. And then you have to kind of find the right article sometimes for this, because it's like this kind of thing. It's like, oh yeah, what's going to happen with this trolley? What's going on here? And then I'll do I just kind of break it up, and I'll have them, okay, summarize the previous paragraph. That's kind of where the writing comes in. And the nice thing about this is that it makes students read in a different way when they know they're going to have to summarize, right? It's like, you can ask them, oh, did you get it? Did you get that paragraph? And then when you take it off screen, and then it's like, okay, summarize. And they're like, can I see it again? Right. So this is just kind of a connection between writing and reading. So that's some of the summarizing stuff we did. All right, I'm just going to keep going, and then if we have time, we can get questions at the end. Okay, this kind of relates back to what we were talking about, the narrative writing. Something I did was try to have them do autobiographical writing, and I had a list. This is just something I found somewhere online, but there was a list of prompts that I thought worked really well. where it's just, first thing I would have them do is just complete the sentence. So like, one of the happiest times in my life was blah, blah, blah. And I would usually say like, pick like 10 of these to finish. So they didn't have to, you know, do all of them if they didn't want to. Like, you don't have to do one of the saddest times of my life. And sometimes it, you know, maybe if you're not in a good mood, you don't want to finish that one. But so there's, that was the first part of it, was just have them complete these sentences, right? One of my biggest successes was ... fill that in. And then I would have them, either they could choose, or I might have, you know, if there was one that struck me, or if they were sharing with another student, one that really stood out, you know, have them write more about that. But these prompts I thought were a really good way to get them started on writing, autobiographical sort of things, narrative type writing. And then, so somebody had asked before about, you know, feedback. And I found that when I was giving feedback on their autobiographical writing on these ones, what was really helpful was just to ask questions. Because I felt like when I would get that first piece of writing, it just kind of wasn't like they were writing about something. I could tell they knew what they were talking about, but it wasn't quite on the page. And I felt like at that point, if I just, you know, I didn't really write anything about, you know, grammar or anything, I would just write down questions in terms of like what wasn't clear to me. So it might be like, you know, where did this take place? It's a lot of those kind of W questions, right? When did this happen? Or, you know, why did you decide to do that? So I would just kind of, that would be my feedback, would just be writing a bunch of questions about things that weren't really clear in their first draft. And then it really worked well, because they would bring back a second draft and it was like, now it was on the page. Like they would see like, oh, okay, yeah, like, you know, they had all the answers to the questions, right? Because they'd actually experienced it. But, you know, you don't always think to put those things on the page, because you're kind of taking it for granted in your own head, as we all do, right? When we're writing something. So that was one kind of feedback technique that was very helpful, was just asking questions. And really I think for any type of writing, especially if you're looking for like more clarity, that's a really useful technique. It's just to, you know, what doesn't make sense, or like what's missing, just ask questions. And then a lot of times you can get a more of a fleshed out version. So that was autobiographical writing. This one is a little bit, this could be a little bit more specialized, but I thought this was a really cool lesson. And I had this idea of having students do interviews and then, you know, write something about it. And I actually, at the time, we had a colleague on staff, Holly Smith, who had experience in journalism. So I was like, instead of me just trying to like fake my way through this lesson, I was like, Holly, would you be willing to like come in and talk to the students about interviewing? And she made this whole lesson that was just, maybe I can share this for a second. It was great. And she came up with this whole lesson where she, you know, there was a few different steps to it. Like one thing she kind of showed them, she interviewed me. First she had them like ask like, what questions, you know, should I fill out the reporter's questions? And you know, she asked them what questions she should ask me, which was it was a very interesting day for me to see what the students wanted to ask about me. So it might be a little bit different for, you know, if you're working one-on-one with a student, and you don't have Holly to come in and kind of be the expert. But I think you could still use this, and it was really amazing. You could see like what somebody who's an expert at this, like she interviewed me, and then she just like wrote this paragraph that just summed up like 10 years of my life. And I was like, how did you like, just like in the most concise way? It was just like, it was amazing. And then she had the students like interview each other. And eventually I had sort of a lot of ideas about trying to interview different types of people and maybe like taking the class out to offices and things. What we ended up doing was some of the, you know, like our CEO and our director and different things came into the classroom, and some of my colleagues, and the students got to interview them. And the cool thing was, it seemed to be really good for the students, but also the staff members who came in also seemed to really get a lot out of it. So it was like kind of, you know, she had this whole lesson, which we can share with you. But the cool thing about the interviewing to me is that you're mixing in a lot of different skills, right? They're speaking, they're listening, they're writing. And also it can be a cool way to, for students to learn, things about that they're interested in, right? So a lot of the things we focused on when we had staff members come in was, they asked them questions about education and their career and their different experiences. In some cases, I learned interesting things about my colleagues. I was like, oh, I didn't know you did that or whatever. So the tricky thing about this one is it's a little bit specialized because, obviously you could have the student interview you if you're comfortable with that. But otherwise you sort of need to find, like a family member or somebody willing to be the interviewee. But I think you will find that people you might be surprised. People kind of like to, talk about themselves. So you might be able to find some people to agree to be interviewed. I think maybe we all have that fantasy in our head of like, oh yeah, somebody's going to interview me, and you get to kind of hold forth. So that's again, that one's a little bit more specialized, but I think it's a cool way. And Holly came up with a really cool lesson to way to do that could be kind of adapted for a one-on-one thing. Okay, so that's interviewing. I went through a few things there a little bit fast. Does anybody have any questions right now about any of the last couple?
Sally had a question about, will these notes be available to us? And yes, we will be making the recordings available of all the sessions as well as any accompanying materials.
Yeah, definitely. We have the PowerPoint and then all the different the things I showed you. I can definitely show those. All right, so coming up on the end here, I wanted to show a few online sources that I have found to be useful. Some of these are a little bit more, there's much reading things, commonlit.org, ReadWorks, but they're also, they have writing questions inside them, and they also are just kind of good fodder to make up different writing activities. Let's see if I can pull this up here. So for example, so Common Lit is a very nice site because you can, and it's one of those things you have to create an account, but it's free, and you can kind of search by, text, and you can search by grade level. So if you have someone who's like 6th, 7th grade, you can pull that up, and they have a lot of different options, and usually in the let's see if we have the questions here. Answer key. So usually they'll have like some multiple choice questions, and they also will have like some writing questions. How do Victor's actions in French class impact the resolution of the story? So this is a nice site that has like a nice mix of like reading and writing activities, and ReadWorks is very, very similar to that. Another one that this sort of is good for like argumentative or persuasive writing, procon.org. You can select your controversy of choice here. Sometimes there's ones that they're little hot button issues that I'm always like, I don't know if I want to do that one. To try to find one that seems good. One time I did that. There's one here on animal testing, and my students were like, they were a little bit sensitive, and they were like, oh, this is like, there was some description of like the the negative side of animal testing. Like, oh, teacher, what are you doing? But there's a lot of good stuff on here. So let's see if we did, let's say artificial intelligence, and they'll give you kind of a breakdown on it, and then there's they give you the pros and the cons broken down. So those can be useful if you want to do like have students the kind of stuff they do on the GED that's like which side of the argument is stronger kind of stuff. So this one has a lot of material. There tends to be a lot of it, like sometimes the pro cons go on for a long time, so you might want to kind of edit it down a little bit. Another thing I include the link for, just in case. I know everybody is not doing GED or high set kind of stuff, but if you are, this is one thing that has been useful for students that the GED gives. They take one GED question and they give you like a ton of different responses to it. And this is helpful. A lot of students, what they seem to want is like models, right? Because they're kind of like, I don't know how to start. Like, how do I do my first paragraph? And you can tell them like a million times, but like when they see it and they see a bunch of different versions, that seems to be very helpful for them. This is kind of broken down by like focusing on different traits, but I use it as much for just kind of like showing them like this is the way different people have written on this one response, this one question, these two essays. And you can see like what worked and what didn't, but also like kind of just the similarities. So that seems to help them a lot of times kind of figure out, things that they're not sure of. So those are some online resources that I've used. Coming up on the end here. So I think I'm going to throw it open to questions overall. Does anybody want to, Roberta, do we have any other questions slotted up or?
Nope, there aren't questions in the chat, although Sally commented about the first exercise, that the what I saw activity really helped to remind her about what had happened.
Nice.
And how useful that was. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that Linda Berry, like, I think she spent a lot of time thinking about like how to work that out. And I think it's a really cool activity that she came up with. So any overall questions or questions at all before we wrap up for today?
Okay, I have a question to get us started maybe. Could you describe concretely exactly what they do have to write for the GED or HiSET?
Sure. Yeah. So it's slightly different, but it's very similar on the two tests. So they give you two different essays or like little passages of some sort that take opposite sides of an argument. Like in the one that I had pulled up here, it's the question of fairly topical daylight savings time, which people, I feel like at this time of year, especially, people have very strong opinions about. So they give you a piece of writing or two pieces of writing where like part of it is the people who are in favor of daylight savings time and talks about what's good about it, and then another one that talks about the negative side of it. That you're never going to know the subject, but that's the basic format, right? Two sides of an argument. That's true on both the GED and the HiSET. The difference is on the GED, they want you to focus. They very specifically say like it's like not your opinion on it, but they want you to analyze the strengths of the opposing arguments, right? And it's like which one is better supported, and then you have to break down which argument is better supported. The HiSET is a little more open to, it's the same thing where they give you two arguments. It's a little more open to like your own opinion. The GED, they're like, don't write your own opinion, just you focus on specifically analyzing which side of the argument is better supported. So that tends to be the difference between them, but they're pretty similar overall.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions? Okay. Yeah, I see a message from, go ahead.
This is Rachel.
Go ahead.
I'm wondering about resources if you are teaching academic writing to students who are interested in attending college, like Allegheny Community College, preparation for the AccuPlacer writing exam. Are there resources? What resources do you know about that are available for that?
That's a good question. Honestly, I haven't done as much in my classes that are focused on that, but we have had some other teachers have done classes that were sort of focused on that kind of writing. So what I might do is see if I can check in with some of maybe those other teachers and see if they might have some resources that are a little bit more directly targeted to what you're saying. So
Okay.
yeah, let me check in with that and I can get back to you, because we definitely have had classes that are a little bit more directly focused on that. So I think they could probably give you better resources. So
Yeah,
I'll make a
I
note.
have
of
a
that.
student that's interested in, applying to community college.
Right.
So I want to help him with that kind of writing.
Yeah, absolutely.
can I interject that I would also
Please.
suggest reaching out to our new tutoring specialist, Christina Indovina, because she is actually actively working on putting together textbooks just for those particular students. There's one on academic word lists, for instance, and that works on developing academic vocabulary, general vocabulary, not discipline specific.
What is her name?
Christina Indovina. I will make a note, Rachel,
Okay,
and
great.
I can have her reach out to you. And I'll
Great.
also put her email in the chat.
Okay, great.
Mhm.
Thanks, Roberta. That's a great idea.
Hi, this is Kathy Lewis.
Hello.
Hi, I have a comment that might be helpful also. I'm working with a advanced ESL student who also is making plans to attend community college. And I met with Andrea Horton, myself and the woman I tutor just last week. And she gave me a lot of very helpful information, including information on the AccuPlacer test. And there is like practice tests on CCAC's website. So that's just like one source that I'm going to look into as, sources for help in practicing writing to get ready for the placement test. Check out the practice tests. So just wanted to make sure that, was it Rachel who asked the question, that she's aware of that?
Yeah, thank you, Kathy. That's great.
Great, thanks.
Good tip.
That's also the topic of one of today's presentations by Andrea on those tests for CCAC. And so if you didn't have a chance to attend that one, it was this morning, the recording will be available. So thank you, Kathy, for that.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
All right, it looks like we got about 10 seconds left here before they close our breakout room. So I just want to say thanks for everybody, your participation, your attention. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Has returned. Oh, someone is recording. So one of the co-hosts, can you make sure if you haven't stopped recording your session, if you could do so